We all had a sueñito. And when it came to dreams, we had to keep scraping by.
Maybe this neighborhood's changing forever. Maybe tonight is our last night together, however.
They're talking about kicking out all the dreamers. It's time to make some noise.
Hey there, ShotDeck. We got another Shot Talk for you. And this one I'm super excited about because I really love this film. I have a connection to one of the filmmakers who's here with us today. And it's In the Heights, Lin-Manuel Miranda's incredible play that has been converted into a movie, adapted is the correct word, by Jon M. And it's a fantastic film, and I'm lucky enough to have him, the director, the DP, Alice Brooks, and the editor, Myron Kerstein, who edited Garden State and Wish I Was Here. So we've gone way back, and so I'm super excited to talk to these three filmmakers about this really just incredible film. Obviously, it's a musical, has tons of music, which is also really interesting to talk about. But it's also got immense amount of creativity packed into it that we're going to talk about today. So excited to have everyone. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, so we could just jump in. First of all, I want to know, I'm going to just start with you, John. Tell me a little bit about, first, how your connection to the filmmakers that are with us today, Alice and Myron, in terms of how did you first meet them? How did you first start working with them?
Yeah.
I know you and Alice go back a bit, I think, but tell me a little bit about that.
Alice and I go way back to film school. She was like the legendary, she was like a semester older than me, but she was like the legendary student that everyone wanted to work with because, you know, in our thesis film, they choose 4 filmmakers and 4 scripts. And before she could even get chosen, when she was like a junior, her script got chosen. And because she couldn't direct it, she was the DP on that project. So she was the DP and the writer of a thesis film before she was a senior. And so that was like unheard of. And so, I remember the short name called Meta. And I was like, whoa. Anyway, I got to convince her a couple years later, or a year and a half later, to shoot my short film, a musical, actually, both of our sort of first big musical short at USC called When the Kids Are Away. And then we worked for many years after that as well. But not on the feature side, just like one on the feature side until In the Heights came around. And we used all the things we had learned over the years to jump into that. And then from then on, Lin-Manuel Miranda stole her from me and used her for Tick, Tick, Boom. And now I'm trying to get her back onto Wicked. So we go way back. It's like family.
Alice, you're having an incredible year. I mean, 2 movies in 1 year is always incredible. And they're both, highly lauded and excited for that. Yeah. So what was your thoughts? Had you known John at school? Or did he come to you sort of, and then you're like, who's this guy?
Yeah, no, I knew John at school because John also was sort of legendary. His very first short film played at Slam Dance, right, John?
Yes, not Sundance, Slam Dance, the cooler one.
Slam Dance. And so everyone's like, he got to go to the festival, he got to go to Park City, and so everyone knew who John was as well. And I actually had graduated from USC, and I spent the year after I graduated, I decided to spend my the next year at USC shooting as many short films, thesis films as possible for grad students, so I could get a decent reel. And during that time is when John made When the Kids Are Away, and we met at Starbucks, which no longer is there any longer at USC. And he showed me this binder. He pulled out this huge binder for his short thesis film. And it was a musical, and I grew up loving musicals. My mom sang to us all the time. We watched Fred and Ginger. We had every single one on VHS. They were on constantly. And so I immediately was so excited that he wanted to do musicals, because it was at a time, it was 2002, and musicals just were no longer being made. And so I was really excited and so John and I really started to bond over this love of the musical.
And by the way, this connects with ShotDeck because that binder, before there was no ShotDeck or even really Google Images or any of those things, I had to collect images in binders, in like file cabinets. Like every time I'd see something interesting, I'd rip it out because we also didn't have camera phones yet.
I did that for years. I mean, this is exactly that. It's like binders of tear sheets from Vogue and like wherever it was. And
this is from film school. Some of these ones, and some of these are from like, I mean, I have a whole desk full. But this is my binder that I showed her, that I made.
Oh my God, that's great. Flip through that a little.
And then
I had to put some in storage because my wife was yelling at me because everything's all over the place.
You know, I even have a warning that the pictures give away the ending. Here are the
Oh my God, so good.
Here's how when we were trying to find a choreographer, these are the things we put up. These are our breakdowns for the casting. 1 second.
This is for a 15-minute short film, and he handed me this binder then, and I was like, wow, this person has insane work ethic. So
org skills and org skills, which is something, yeah.
I learned so much from him from that, and ever since then, like, I mean, our lookbooks are always crazy, and often he won't show me his lookbook for a movie, and then I show him mine, and we have the same pictures.
These are images I made when I was pitching my first Bye Bye Birdie out in the world. The first one after, like, I made all these like images. Each number had like color references and throwback references to things. So ShotDeck to me is like a game changer.
Well, that's really the essence. I mean, and going back to Myron, like my meeting with Zach Braff on Garden State, it was a lookbook. It was basically me renting DVDs and Blu-rays. I mean, back then maybe it was just still DVDs, pulling screen grabs and putting them together into like a little thing of like, this is the look of the movie and this is what I see. And it's the essence of why we even created this site, was because it was essential, and I wanted something that was super searchable in ways that all these disparate images in folders on my computer were just a mess. All right, so Myron, it was the first time you guys worked together on Crazy Rich Asians?
That's correct.
Right. And was it like were you looking for an editor that had some experience with like what that led you to Myron, besides obviously all the great work he had done? But tell me a little bit about how you guys found each other. And
well, we were connected because I was going to Singapore and Malaysia for Crazy Rich Asians, and I had worked with some great editors throughout my time, but they were very different types of movies, and so I was looking for someone who made movies that had mixed languages of visual and audio languages, I guess. And we were paired by Brad Simpson, who had worked in some way with you, Myron.
And we had worked on he had worked on Velvet Goldmine with me. I was an assistant editor and he was a post supervisor. You know, I had gone on to do Garden State and things like Glee 3D concept movie, which David Nixay was one of the producers on, and Kevin Tancherone, who directed that, had a connection to John. So it was a sort of synergy of a lot of different people who led me to John. And of course,
it was a very good blind date, essentially. And they were like, you guys will love each other. And then we sat down, because the reality is Crazy Rich Asians is not a musical, but it is sort of the structure of a musical, and it has the spirit of a musical. And so when we sat, and by the way, Garden State was a huge, I mean, I love Garden State. And so, especially at that moment in my life as a storyteller, seeing that movie, seeing how personal and that music, that soundtrack, of course, like everything like connected for me. So sitting with Myron, asking him questions all about Garden State and things like that, was like such a great combination of ideas and spirits. So we jumped in there, and Myron could tell more about that. But in the end, I felt like we were soulmates in a way, creative soulmates. And so there was nobody else and he made my life a lot easier. When you find an editor that you match up with really well, it betters your life. And so when it came to In the Heights, I was like, we got to do this. And we were actually editing Crazy Rich Asians when he was like, what are you working on next? And I was showing him my deck for In the Heights. And he's like, let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, and Myron has some experience. I mean, even going back to camp, right, Myron? Like with music and cutting music and film, obviously Velvet Goldmine and even stuff like even Hedwig, right? Or
Yeah, Hedwig and Camp and Velvet Goldmine, and I did a remake of Fame and the Glee 3D
yeah,
concert
that's
movie.
right. I forgot
Yeah.
about the Fame.
So everything was leading me to John and In the Heights, and I got to meet Alice as well because we did a pilot in between for Home Before Dark for this Apple TV show. So I got to know Alice and saw the chemistry between Alice and John, and frankly was a little intimidated because Alice was so amazing and John and Alice had such a history, and so I felt like the new guy coming into John's world, but at the same time both of them were raising my bar, so it just felt like when we got to In the Heights, it was just wonderful to just start getting in there and inspiring each other.
Yeah. Well, it's Todd Phillips always says to me, he's like, I have three lovers on the set. I have the writer, that's like a relationship, and then I have to basically cheat on them with my DP, and then I leave them all for my editor at the end. And then it's like then we start over again on the next movie. He's like, basically it's like in that time they're the most important and the most sort of like, it's the relationship that matters the most for the period in which we're sort of fully engrossed within that section of the movie making process.
Love that. That's so true. That's so true. And what's great is that we get to be really honest with each other. Our relationships are all very different from each other, but and in different phases of the production. But at the same time, like I love that we can call each other out on each other's shit. We can find the better idea. We can stand up for our ideas. Like there's nothing off boundaries. We all are hungry and want to make the best thing, and that's like it's the best combination of that.
And John also has I would call Myron every day at wrap on In the Heights when I was in my cab going back to my apartment, and we just have a quick rundown because he was watching every single frame, and John loves collaboration and inspires collaboration among everyone, and so I was just able to check in with Myron and see, what we could do better, or what things, I could grow from or learn from. And he'd tell me like, oh, you should look at this clip, or just be a champion of what we were doing that day. And it was really, really wonderful.
I was mostly a cheerleader through the process, I have to say. I was like, yeah, keep doing what you're doing. Yeah, it made me cry again today. So great work.
Did some of those conversations, Alice, involve like you were just coming off the day of shooting? And you're like, hey, listen, look for this one moment. I remember us having this one moment. Look for that. Were there specifics, or was more like this? Oh, we ran out of light. This like what were kind of some of the rundowns of what you were they things of like you were concerned of?
Sometimes it was, we were daylight dependent on. We shot 39 days on location. 39 days out of 49 days on location. So we were always running out of light. So that became a very quick question not to tell Myron about, because he knew that. But I don't even remember specifically. It was more about he got to watch, 7 hours of dailies or something that day, and I wanted to know about the day before.
About his, got it. I see.
And I would be going down to company 3 actually, and jumping in the lab too to see, to do a color correct at company 3 for our dailies too.
All right, let's just jump into the scene here for a second. Let's just jump into the beginning of the movie. The movie opens in a little sort of bar by a beach in Dominican Republic, and you're telling me this is Long Island. Can't be.
We didn't think it was possible.
Yeah, right. I would imagine you'd be like, come on, guys. We got to go to the DR for like 1 week. Can't we?
Yeah. We went on these like location scouts and we're like, this is a waste of our time. You're going to have to pay the money to get us over to the DR. And then on the last beach, we got here, and all that land back there is real. Like the shape of the land is what it is. The palm trees are not real, but there's a lot of real stuff in that. We brought in the palm trees in the foreground, and then the ones in the background are digital. And yes, the watercolor was different, but everything else is pretty there. There's a dock, even on the other side, there's a dock that exists there. And we just changed the color of the water and added like some boats and things in there. It was pretty, we just got away with it.
We walked out from like being in the car for 4 hours because we had just gone like, I feel like to Jersey or something to look at a beach. And then we drove all the way to Long Island, and everyone's like, this is the biggest waste of time. And we walked through, I think it was a convent to get to this beach. And we walked through his property, and then suddenly it was like, okay, here we are in the DR.
And remember, we had to and credit to Nelson Coates, our production designer, who had to actually make this happen, as well as our VFX supervisor, Mark Russell. But we had to match the background to whatever was going to be painted on the background of the bodega itself, because it was a story point.
Yes, that's right. That's right. That sort of tie back to the end of the movie when you reveal that he's telling the story to his.
Yes. So it wasn't just about finding a space that we could get away with. It was finding a space, but also that sort of represented the DR in a way that could be a mural behind the counter. And because it's a reveal that we're actually not on that beach. This is a space that's here. So anyway.
That's incredible. You know, I've been in the same situation. I remember even seeing other people's movies. I remember working with John Hamburg, and he's like showing me scenes from like what was supposed to be Hawaii, which it was, I think, in Along Came Polly. But they had to do all kinds of sky replacement, and I've had to do that at times and make a sky that's not perfect and blue. And I've always felt like it doesn't work. And I was hook, line, and sinker. Oh, that's great. You know, movies in New York, you got to go to DR for a little bit. So amazing.
We worked on it a lot. We had a great team.
Yeah, and you know, that wave crashing in the beginning used to be stock footage, and then we actually did go to the DR to shoot that one shot.
Well, I wondered that. I thought, okay, that blue is like something. But I actually assumed it was stock.
It's because there was another movie shooting in the DR that was Warner Brothers, and they're like, "Hey, we have a helicopter going over this weekend. Do you want us to get us something?" So we sent over like the stock footage that it needs to be kind of like this, but it needs to have these kind of attributes for our movie. And
the visual effects supervisor went and knew exactly what we wanted to. So he was there.
Awesome. And let me ask you, on your aerials, do you shoot your own aerials? Did you go? Do you plan them all out and go out there? And what's the story with the aerials? Because there's some great aerials in this movie.
Yeah, we talk a lot about them. We have temp stock stuff that Myron will temp in, but we know, I mean, they're usually not that close to these, although maybe one or two of them. And then we have a copter that goes up with. For these ones, we had Mark, our VFX supervisor, go up, or our second unit, I guess, go up and go shoot these aerials. And they're very
all these top-down shots too. That was thematically something we were doing throughout the movie. So we wanted these bird's eye view shots rather than just the straight horizon helicopter shots. Talking
about the day exterior thing, I think there's nothing trickier for a DP and more stressful than day exteriors.
Yep.
Because you're completely out of your control and stuff like that. And I remember when I first watched the movie back when it came out, the first weekend it came out, I was stressed myself about the pool scene. Only because it was literally my first question when I think I even emailed you, was like, it's all a massive space, day exterior. I don't know how many days or what the timetable you took to shoot it, but it just made me go, oh my God, I can only imagine trying to control this. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about that, Alice, and also even from a directing and scheduling standpoint to Myron trying to sort of work around those sort of natural, stressors of that. But these overhead shots here, because I know it's not as simple as going, let's get a 50-foot techno. I mean, we have that pool shot in Garden State that literally the techno could barely even get that frame in shot. And this is way wider. Is this from a Condor? Tell me a little bit about this specific shot and how wide this is.
So this was pretty tricky because the pools are in Washington Heights, and they used to be the reservoir for the state or for the rest of Manhattan. And so there's all these tunnels underground under the deck. And so originally we wanted to use a drone for this shot, but there's a no drone rule in New York. And so that was out. And then we were looking at cable cam, but we wanted, ability to move, be closer or wider very quickly. And so finally we ended up with a 45-foot movie bird. And the only reason we ended up with that crane is because that was the maximum weight we could have on the deck.
Right.
So
it's a reservoir, so there's all this stuff underneath it.
Yeah, right. And the movie bird's a lot lighter than a Techno.
Yeah.
But that's incredible. You could get that high with a 45 movie bird. I wouldn't think.
We also switched from anamorphic to spherical lenses, so that gave us full use of the full 8K sensor, which widened us out. That was the first thing, and then there's of course the movie magic too.
Oh, is there some extension here?
Well, for her in the middle, for instance, she was in the middle, and then every time they would do the moves, there would be so many waves that she would get shifted around. It looked crazy because she would be like, right. So then we did a version where we didn't have her in the middle, and then we shot a plate where she was in the middle, and we sandbagged her onto the floor, and I'm inside the water, holding on one side with the monitor, like trying to stay out of the shot, and then we have another one of the dancers holding the other string to hold her in place as she sang, and then we sort of put that on. And so, yes, there was. Yeah,
because she kept spinning round and round and round and round.
So I love that story because but that is probably not something you could have predicted in advance.
No.
In so much, it's exactly one of those things that happens on every movie set every day. It's like, oh, great, I never thought this would happen. And now we have to scramble to sort of figure out how to merge these two. Well, again, listen, the beautiful thing about the movie is I can tell intuitively how complicated so many things are, and yet it's seamless. Like even this, my big question was like, geez, I guess you're on a 120-foot arm getting this all in camera. The fact that there's even anything that's comped in there is incredible.
I think we ended up, our lens was super wide. I can't remember. It was either like an 18 mil or 14 mil just to get full as wide as we could. And the 8K sensor totally saved us as well.
By the way, every time I would take the train and I would see that swimming pool where you guys shot, I would always go, this is a cool location. Somebody should shoot there.
It's crazy.
It's so indicative of like a city pool, like those don't exist in that same way anymore, And
it wasn't written like that in the script. We were location scouting. We were down the block from where we were on the street, the intersection that our movie takes place in. And we're like, what's that building? And Kiara, who wrote the movie, who lives in Washington Heights, who's Lynn's best friend, took us over there, and she's like, oh, this is where we do our summer swims. And we look out there, and I'd never seen pools this big before. I was like, this is where you guys swim? Like, yeah. I'm like, this is incredible. And we were sort of joking around like, oh yeah, we got to do like a Busby Berkeley Esther Williams thing here. Wouldn't that be funny? And as soon as we said it out loud, we were like, oh no, we have to do it now. We have to do it. Like, that's the universe challenging us. And we're looking at it, and these pools are huge. Our line producer's like, how are you going to have enough people to fill this space?
Right.
And in the end, we had about, 600, something like that, extras, plus dancers, plus our full cast, ages like 5 to 90. We had to prevent drowning. So we had lifeguards there and constantly watching the water. You have to prevent hypothermia because it's actually cold water. We tried to warm it for like a week, but it wasn't enough. And so you have to have towels for everybody, and the towels have to stay dry throughout the day, or you have to have a cycle of how you're drying these towels. You have to, first of all, huge dangers because you have giant pieces of electricity everywhere in a giant pool with kids and old people. So you've got to manage that. You got to put these people somewhere. So we used the Palace there to like put them. You have to feed them. We have barbecues. So you have fire elements. So you have all those things that come with that. And on top of that all, and I'll let Alice take it from here about it, is, it was raining.
Well, I was wondering because I went, well, I didn't imagine that you could have covered this to create this sort of like soft top light over the course. Because I'm like going, man, just imagine how you would deal with the sunlight if it was. But then I did suspect that this was a troubled day as far as like, we're not moving the schedule for this. we're shooting and this is what you're left with. Alice, go.
Yeah, we had to, I mean, we backed up into the pool. The pool opened for the summer and they get something like 5,000 visitors a day. And we could not shoot past that once they opened for the summer. We have 2 days here, 2 days to shoot with 500 extras and 75 dancers and our full cast. And then it's raining, and it started raining on Sunday afternoon before we were shooting on Monday, and John and I were sitting at one of the picnic benches working on our shot list, and like slowly on our iPads, the rain starts trickling in and we couldn't move it. There was nothing to do. Like
Jurassic Park, but for filmmakers. You're like, just a drop on the iPad. You're like, wait, oh no, this is the monsters coming.
Yeah.
So there were things that it worked great for, like those overhead shots. I mean, we didn't have to deal with painting out reflections of the crane, but we didn't have summer sun, and we also it was freezing, as John said. So the dancers and the cast in the pool were freezing, and then we had the water on top, the rain dripping on the top of the water. So we all had to pivot really, really quickly, and it would be like, okay, people are splashing here, you won't see the water drops.
Right.
And then the same thing, like
right.
let's have the go straight, let's do the underwater footage.
And anytime you see underwater footage, we're shooting that because it's raining hard on top.
Brilliant.
Because it's raining so hard, we had to bring in huge lights because it's so dark to just dig into the water to be able to see anything. So, and then we didn't want we needed to move the lights out away from the pool when we were shooting on the deck. So it was our entire team really being flexible. So this one, suddenly we're shooting towards the other direction, towards the bleachers. And suddenly the sun comes out. And I said, John, we have to shoot the end of this dance number right now. And he's like, okay, let's do it. And so literally everyone just turned their attention to this side, and the sun was out for an hour and then it went away again. But that's when we shot this part. And then we got
and because they're splashing, how much better. You couldn't have backlit that wide of a space with lights, no matter how many lights you have against the sun and
yeah, and that's what that's one of the many things that make this shot really exciting. And it's a big crane shot that we had rehearsed. And then we ended up with a third day because we were down so much for rain. But it's still, that third day, it really was John and me and the AD going, okay, we got to be here. We shoot everything this direction as quickly as we can, 1 or 2 takes, just to get through all the coverage we needed. And it was definitely the hardest 3 days on this movie.
And we were always changing because we were in a certain direction. We were like, well, we're going to have like 20 minutes for that other shot. Maybe we move that dialogue piece right here. We move that number right here on this edge. So it was always trying to adjust and figure that out. Yeah. And then we dumped all of this footage on top of Myron.
Well, yeah, that's what my next question was. Exactly. Well, but the 2 days, the third day you had, I assume, was just the next day after the first 2, or did you come back at a different time?
No, it was the next day. So we were 3 days consecutive, and then the pool opened for the summer.
Got it. And so then, Myron, I assume, knowing that there was like weather issues and all that, you had to put your full attention to try to sort of go, okay, what do we have? What do we need? Kind of all of that kind of stuff.
Well, it was one of the few times I actually visited set was when they were shooting this sequence. And I remember I first visited John and Alice on set in their trailer. And, they're literally
the only day John never goes to his trailer. I'm just going to interrupt. He is like always on set, like no matter what. And it was pouring rain. So we went and worked in his trailer.
And they're trying to figure out like how are they going to finish this sequence. And I think they're both like literally sitting on the ground of the trailer, and eating their lunch and trying to like game out the rest of the week. And they turn to me, they're like, this is a glamorous life of set right here, so it was
They're like, is it raining in your editorial suite today? Because
it's so cozy in that room, Myron. You just got your coffee and your crew is like bringing lunch to you.
Yeah, I knew the choice of the department a long time ago. And that was one of the reasons.
I always jokingly say, because it's like the editor and the DP relationship is always it's like they're so inextricably tied together, right? Because the editor can make a movie and like a DP is like, oh, I shot all this stuff, you fucked it up, or I shot a bunch of mess, you just saved my life. It's like just like an actor can, an editor can save a performance. But I always laugh whenever they're like, couldn't you have just gotten this other take? And I'm like, hey, listen, tomorrow 6 p.m. on the dot, all your electricity is going off, and if nothing's been saved, that's all you have. Everything you have. So let's just edit for a week that way, and then we can talk.
Exactly.
No, I had a lot of empathy, but I have to say I was mostly just really excited about the sequence, and it was a lot of the section, a lot of the sections of this number are very contained because they're like little handoffs from one character to the other, and then they shot a lot of I would just say extra footage of the community dancing and reacting to things. So that was sort of like the movable pieces that I could play within the sections or build up the ending. As far as the rain, I just ignored it. I just figured that we were going to fix it, or if people were so into the musical number, they weren't going to care if there was rain or not. There was definitely shots where when I watched the film, like, oh, it's pouring here, and but nobody's going to know it. And I just felt like I was just dealing with a lot of great footage, and I would say that this number wasn't actually, as much as it was a problem on set, it wasn't really a problem in editorial. Like there was
how you cut it originally is basically how it ended up being. And what's great about Myron and what, these numbers seem very big, and yes, it takes all this stuff to make it happen, but actually the number works because it's actually really, really intimate. It is the whole Block's I Want song. And 96,000 is a very interesting number. 96 to Lin was always like the line, 96th Street of like the rich and the poor in New York. And 96,000 will like give you one dream, but will not like give you your whole life. And so it's a really interesting that everyone gets to want something. And here we connected not just on a silly way of like, hey, your fantasy, but actually on a very real, honest way. There's a shot of these older people in the community. They're just extras, but they're like, you can see when they look at the car, when they look at the ticket, that they're imagining, sending their kids to school. Or a little bit of security for their home. And like, to me, that's what Myron's really good at is, yes, the spectacle, of course, that takes a certain person who understands rhythm and music and how to connect things emotionally, but actually like the little weird things from each of the characters that allow this for Sonny to rap in that big rap in the middle of the pool, for him to like nail it and actually mean something to the audience, that, oh, this represents something more than just a moment in a song. This is like the youth of tomorrow. This is like what our whole movie is about. And so anyway, he finds those things and it's very fun. And we don't talk a lot after the day of shooting because I know he's going to find the best gems. And I know I make like selects, but not for him, for myself,
right?
Just so I remember.
Yeah.
And then so when I see it fresh through his eyes, then I'm either like, great, or I'm like, there was this one take. Let me just look through my files and see if I can find what that take is. And so it's really collaborative in that way.
Yeah, I would suspect that is the thing you actually want, is somebody not working off of what you already have in your head, but a total fresh set of eyes to discover something you may not have thought about. Because, it's like it seems clear that you make a plan. You have a very specific idea of where you're going to go, where the coverage is going to be, where each moment's going to be. But you've got this person. I think Myron once said that to me when we were talking about Wish I Was Here. He's like, I don't actually want to know. I don't want to see the storyboards. I want to actually just take the material and then cut it and I would think as a director, that's the best thing you got. Because now suddenly it's brand new eyes and a brand new perspective that, you discover something brand new in the scene that you were blind to because you had a plan,
I always say that when we're shooting the movie, you can all the plans, but the movie starts to speak to you if you're listening. You know, the actors are bringing something, the environment is bringing something, your camera team is bringing something, and it's changing what you thought this movie was going to be. And it's not for all filmmakers probably, but for me, that's where I need to actually lean in, and I need to start to like lean towards the place that we're headed, because that's where your best stuff is going to be, instead of fighting it and try to force it to be in some box that I thought about in my bedroom in fucking West Hollywood. Like, if it's that version, then it's not good enough. It's got to be the version that gets inspired.
I think that's such a great point. I think that's such a great point, because the movie is constantly changing. It's the script is changing as you make it. The actors are bringing a brand new thing. You may discover I think that's like the best thing that you can say to the young directors is like, have a plan, but really be watching the movie while you're making it, because it's telling you the movie you're making as you're making it.
But I get why that's hard, because you have to trust yourself and trust your team to know that the dots will connect eventually, and that takes either experience or it takes experience really to have that kind of trust. And other people around you, producers, studios, are trying to get it so locked in, so that because they don't know what's going to happen on set, and that insecurity can creep into the script. It can creep into your planning to really box it in, so that they know that they're getting something very specific. And as a director, I think you want to give yourself as much room to be able to. And if you fall too much into this box, now you are coloring in the lines, and I think that can get you in trouble. And I've done both, so I know.
Yeah, and I think also there are directors who then fallen in love with the chaos, and then they stop planning at all, and then they're just like. And by the way, can make brilliant movies. I feel like David O. Russell has pieces of that, where it's like, no, the chaos is where the magic comes, so it's going to all be chaos, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a different way to skin it. But let me, along those lines, and this is actually for each of you guys. Where is a moment, because I remember, even as somebody who's took a shot at directing as well a couple times, a day where you're like, this is not working. And then you have to do that thing in the day, figure out like, why is it not working? Which way do I like, the plan doesn't work, this and that. Were there any moments like that on the set? And it has come to me as a DP as well, where I come in with a plan, I'm like, this just doesn't work. And yet, suffering from time pressures, you have to quickly make a decision. Do you bail, or do you sort of follow through?
We have many of those moments almost every time. But the one that I remember the most, that had the most impact, and one of the highest stress moments was, at the end, when everyone's on the street and we're pulling out. We did 2 shots. We did one, when we were in this configuration, we owned the streets. We had to close down, 2 streets 2 blocks on the left, 2 blocks on the right, 2 blocks up front, 2 blocks out. So this is like a massive day for us. We have massive amounts of extras and massive amounts of dancers, and we have our cast there, and we have these fire hydrants that are going off, and apparently we're using real fire hydrants. So we're timing where the water falls so that it doesn't get all over the camera. It doesn't like mess up our shot. We can weave our way through. What I don't realize, because we spend about 45 minutes setting up all these where the water is going to drop. 20 minutes later, they're in completely different areas. I'm like, guys, what's the problem here? And I realized, we're using real water here. And so anybody who's taking a shower on this block, up the pressure. So now we have no control over where this stuff drops. That sun has to be in the perfect spot for Alice for us to shoot this last moment of this movie.
Sure, it's the actual finale. It's like,
and we're pulling out. The idea at the beginning was the opening number. We come out and we don't end up out here. We actually start to end up on one guy in this group of people, and that's where the story is going to bring us. And by the end, we're supposed to sort of pull back and come back to the whole group again. But every time we're doing it, the water's getting in the lens, or something's not working. It's clearly not very emotional. It's not very like big. Maybe we don't have enough people or something. It doesn't feel big enough. So then we've probably done this like 4 times. It's not working. And we're running that sun is dropping. Alice is like, the sun is going to be gone very soon. And so we're like, we probably have 2 shots at this. And I'm like, all right, then I think we have to try the other, because we had talked about going the other way before. And at this point, we're like, we have 2. Do we take all those practices that we just did, those 4 takes, and throw it out the door and just say, let's go instead of out, in to out, out to in. And then, but he would have to not just, little girl would have to get into his arms. He has to take off, he has to kiss his wife, take off his hat, put it on the little girl, and the little girl's then gonna have to look right in the lens. And can we do that in 2 takes? And if we don't, we're screwed because we can't close the street off ever again. And the actors, the little girl, Alice, and I are sitting there looking at each other. We're like, let's do this. Let's go. And so we got 2 shots at this. Everyone's stressing. They're already trying to kick us off. The cops are already talking to our producer. We're like, just roll. And we roll and we do it. The first time we come in and we're coming in and the water's not in the right place. It starts to fog up the lens. And we're like, oh no, we got one last shot. And the last one, we come in and he pulls in his wife. He kisses her wife. The little girl gets in his arms. He takes off the hat, puts it on the little girl. The little girl looks right at the lens. The only time she ever looks right directly in the lens.
Oh my God.
That smile, and we're out. And everyone thought maybe thought this might not have worked because she held the look, but not long. It's like just a little short. But Myron looked through the footage and was like, no, it is definitely the one. And we just slowed down her look.
That's what I wonder, right?
Just to hold it for that beat so that we could cut to black.
But it was funny because there was a lot of people from the crew saying, oh, it's this other angle where the camera's fogging up. There was some mistake. I can't, Alice, you could speak to it.
We had a spinner on the lens.
Yeah.
And it was like the steam coming off the asphalt was insane because it was 95 degrees and everything was overheating. And so we got in, and just as we got in, there's like, you can see like it looks like some 1930s movie with all the Vaseline around the lens. And I mean, in terms of like the hydrants, also our crane had to move through the water, and they weren't in the right place at any moment, and it had to move through the water perfectly so that it didn't completely crash. So
look at this frame, like she's looking literally the perfect look.
Oh, it's awesome.
It's natural.
And the light couldn't have been any better either. Like it was the sun, I mean, it had just set behind the George Washington Bridge. It was perfect. And so then you also, all the street lamps feel brighter. It just has this hint of more magic that
yeah, right.
Like the bodega lights are much brighter.
And I think I run into this frame like screaming, like, yeah.
When you see a take like that, you're just like, that's the end of the movie. Like there isn't even a question. So when other people start like speaking to you, like it's this one or this one, it was the same thing with like Champagne, that you guys shot all these oneers with the whole numbers of oneer. And you're like, no, it's this take. And so it's always amazing when your DP and director come to you like, which take did you do? You're like, oh, it's this one. And so you just kind of know without anyone, sort of, trying to influence you. You just have a real gut reaction to something.
Yeah. Champagne, which we are about to click on, is
this is all one big long steady cam.
But it's 3 minutes live vocals, so they're singing it live. We're in a real apartment. We have a piano on the sidewalk. They all have in-ears, because the piano, they're changing their sort of BPMs while they're singing, their sort of rhythm, because they're coming in and out of dialogue or moments that they want to choose when to come back in. And so they're hearing it in their ears. We're all hiding. I think there's really just the sound guy and our Steadicam guy in there. I'm hiding in a bathroom.
And I was right outside the front door.
She's outside the front door. All the lights have to be hidden.
Of course.
They have to fit through such thin spaces walking past each other. Like at some point, she's like 3 inches from that lens without looking at them or bumping into them, with no camera shadow. And the floor is squeaky.
Snobby, are you alright?
I'm fine, I'm trying to open this champagne. You see the twisty thing is broken, but I'm gonna open this damn champagne.
You spoke to the live vocals thing, because I wondered that. It was one of my notes to myself about like, how do you deal with, generally speaking, this? I assume not all pieces were live vocals, of course, but this one you chose to do live vocals. Mm-hmm. They have earwigs in, or they have right, and then this piano was outside enough that they could hear it, but the
in their
record,
ears.
In their
they
ear.
could hear it in their ears, but obviously you were just catching their clean vocals, right?
Yeah.
And so why live vocals here? Tell me a little bit about that decision.
The main thing was we always wanted the option for live vocals at any time we felt like it needed it in our rehearsals in the space. So if we had like, even if we were out on the streets and they were singing the start of a song, if the a cappella version of that song felt like they wanted to drag out a note longer than what we had recorded, we wanted to give them the ability. So we always had a Pro Tools guy there ready to adjust and give us what we needed. So this was one that we realized that we were in a protected sound space that we could do this in. And this was this is the opposite of dancing on the side of a building, because we weren't going to do any cuts and we we're going to do any tricks. It was just going to be them. And in order to make it feel so as honest and real as possible, they needed the ability to not be stuck to a rhythm. So that's where we decided for this. And then other moments like Abuela in Paciencia y Fe, when she's in the tunnel and she sings and it echoes through the tunnel of like, what will I do? Should I leave or stay? That's all live. And so we just throughout we'll have pockets of live stuff. We knew we couldn't do it all the time because New York City has buses and sounds that it would just be a mess. But as much as we could, we gave the ability to do that.
Yeah, and like you say, the main reason, like any performance, is so that they're not suddenly trying to lip sync to something that's pre-recorded.
And then our Steadicam operator for this also had an earwig in. So he could hear, so that he could hear the piano playing. And there's a moment when they're in the bedroom and we're going around and around and around them. And Vanessa gets to take this pause. And so the Steadicam operator, amazing guy, Mark Schmidt, had to just like listen and feel it, because he couldn't keep going if she wasn't going. So he had to improv as well with wherever she took that moment.
Yeah, well, I've worked with Mark. He's fantastic. This is it's a great example. I even love like where you're introduced them through or you see this reflection shot, and then
the day before, it was a Monday or a Sunday. Chris Scott, who's the choreographer, and we went to the location on the Sunday before, just the three of us. We got security to let us in, and we walked through this over and over and over again. Sometimes John and Chris were Vanessa and Usnavi, sometimes me and Chris, and we'd take our iPhone and start to work it out. And that's where we had seen this number in rehearsal, but we hadn't really been in the empty apartment before. And so we were able to look at this reflection, and then there's a second reflection also in a curio cabinet in the kitchen, so that you could see them both at once there as well.
And this is where this is a practical location.
First floor, but first floor of a brownstone. So you're up.
Sure. So so basically
the actual one in that name on that intersection. So the exterior is this building is for this.
Right. And
that was all the real.
Obviously, in anything like this, you're just working the windows. Do you have any other tools that you're using to try to create your 360 environment?
Yeah, we have. So at the front window, we have an 18K Arri Max and an 18K Fresnel. And then in the back windows, we have two M90s, and we frosted the windows. And then in the middle, in the kitchen, it's pretty dark. So we put a light gear tool under the oven hood. And then we used one more light mat just to push up in the ceiling, but the ceilings are quite low too.
Sure.
240 helped us in this location in terms of hiding things. And then we had one other light mat product. So there's two light mats, a light gear strip, and that's it inside.
But like to give a little, if you wanted to give a little fill, you could do that by just hiding lights up in the ceiling with the light gear. Is that the idea?
Well, we only did it. We could only do it in the kitchen, because otherwise the kitchen was the only place the rest of we saw the ceiling everywhere else.
Got it. So this little bit of fill, let's say in a shot like this, which is in the straight backlight of the window, is it just bounce back from the walls and stuff? Got it.
Bounce back from the walls. So, and we had the Arri Max is really steep and hitting the wood floors, so that's bouncing back.
It's sort of skipping around in a lovely way. Yeah, that's incredible. I looked at this. This was a question I pre-asked to Alice, because I was incredibly amazed that so many things were shot in location that I just assumed were built stages. And the big one, which was also one of the most incredibly expressive and creative, pure creativity was this entire sequence with Abuelo from the time she goes into the subway, from Abuela going to the subway to the transition, this transition here, which was really cool, to this exterior, I mean, the actual subway platform, which is amazingly expressive with lighting and cues and all these things, all the way to like her and at the end in this like incredible graffiti tunnel. So this whole sequence, her guest,
we had to clear every single one of those artists.
Oh my God, I can only imagine. Well, thank God you cleared it. You know, we never cleared Mike Tyson's tattoo and hangover, and that became a whole thing. Some guy got a lot of money.
Somebody.
So wait, okay. So let me just jump into this because I was and I think Alice said, because I know the platform. It's the same platform, by the way, which is like bonkers. That's the same platform as Joker, right? Joker. Which is crazy, which is also an incredible platform. But the reason I couldn't believe that you guys shot it practically was because you transformed it so remarkably and because of all the cues. So I'm going to start just with Alice because I got a fanboy for a second with her and just find out a little more specifics about how you did this. Because let's just start with the subway. Okay. Is that subway connected to that platform?
This train is connected. All the trains are parked in this platform.
Okay.
So this is poor man's process.
Right, with like literally jimmying off the lights, like with the guy in the other thing where he turns off.
Yeah, so the flicker of the lights, because it's the MTA, they wouldn't let anyone touch anything. So we have the gaffer, the choreographer, and the MTA operator standing all together by that light switch and cueing him when to flick, when to do the light flick.
We did the same thing on Joker. It's bonkers. But yeah, that's exactly what we had to do. Yeah. And then obviously, so match cutting with the change of wardrobe between the two people. So tell me, like, specifically, right? Because the match cut's quite perfect, but obviously there's ways around it. Is you shoot this first part, right? You get up to a section where you know you're going to like make this transition. And then what? Everyone quickly gets changed. You sort of like match it off eye with pencil marks on the monitor.
And it's not the same cast.
Right. So okay. So you bring in so that helps too, right? So
that helps, yeah.
People.
But even so, it was still all eye matching. There was, I mean, we had like a little bit of but it was on a steady cam, so it's not like
right.
Yeah, it's not perfect. I often refer to this movie as a fairy tale because every day we were up against these enormous challenges. And then at the end of the day, we had to overcome these huge challenges. And so, and then we continued on our journey. And then the next day we had a new challenge. It was very quick, but we were on Steadicam and we were just lining it up. You know, we just had the two frames, and that's how we did it.
And then she transitions. You've obviously gone in there and you've put a bunch of units in there and a dimmer board and all the things. But talk to me about, because it's like not just the execution of it, but the actual design and plan is so unbelievably beautiful and expressive and emotional with the lighting. I know the limitations of working in the subways. I know how much of a pain they are. You know, talk to me just about like what units you're using and just also some of the plan to get this, because this whole section with all these downlights and the cues and all of that are just incredible.
Thank you. I think we started talking about as soon as we discovered this subway, then it became a discussion about how we were going to execute it, and all the departments worked together on this. And so the lighting part of it, the gaffer and I, on a Saturday, we did a sort of a mock subway platform on a stage, and the costume designer brought in these beautiful costumes because they obviously make a huge difference. They're very neutral, and so the light's going to play off of them. And the choreographers came so we had two dancers in the wardrobe so that we could start to figure out what the light would look like. And then as we started to figure out the colors, Jon came about midway through the day or towards the end of the day, and we showed him what our design was, and we fine-tuned it from there, in terms of the cool light represents Cuba. The cool light represents New York, and the warm light represents Cuba. And so we very specifically picked those two colors with Jon later in the day once we got into a pretty close place. And then we went into the subway, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks later, and it was a 5-day load in, because we're 3 stories underground. There's no elevator, and then we have to run, DMX cable all through the subway. It's all rigged above, and we have lots of theatrical units. We've got and then the very last piece that went in are these subway cars. So we have these vintage subway cars, and as we already discussed, the MTA doesn't let you touch anything. So we just had to turn off all the lights. You can see here, we hid tighten tubes.
Wow, that's so good.
And then there's a wooden batten that's made, that was painted the same color as the ceiling. And so that's how we hid our lights in the subway cars, because they had to also pop in really quickly, because we only had these vintage subway cars for the day of the shoot.
But those you could DMX and control, no, because you took out the other ones. I mean, or like turned them off, right? Exactly.
We turned off, So, and the MTA was actually pretty great. That first shot on Abuela, when she walks out of the modern day subway car onto the platform, they let us change one bulb so that we could dim it off as she walked.
Right.
I mean, literally, this was a live immersive experience, because you could walk through each of these sections and the lights could change accordingly to what the dance was happening. Everything was laid out on a map of, here's the modern train. She comes out here, she goes into the next, 1930s train, and then she goes into another 1920s train, and then she ends up here, and she comes back the other way on the other side of the platform. And so it was all, meticulously sort of planned out of where these things were. And then when they did the sort of mock version the week or 2 weeks before, it was deciding how moody are we going to be? What's the tone? We could talk about all day long, but until we saw it with the costumes and with our actors and some of the dance movement, we couldn't really know. And then the day we get in there and just imagine, once we're in this space, everything have taken all these days to set up. At noon that day, we get a call from the MTA saying, hey, there's been an accident on another platform. We have to route our trash train through this tunnel. So you need to clear everything out and let it pass. It takes 45 minutes to pass through. And according to our schedule, we can't go any longer. So we actually have to move everything, take everything down.
All those tighten tubes had to be removed that we had.
Right, because you had to clear your train then. Yeah. Oh my God.
Move all these trains out, let this trash train, which smells, for 45 minutes walking through as we're sitting there staring at this thing. And then as soon as it's out, put everything back in and continue. That was probably the darkest moment of this show.
Oh my God. Well, listen, but the result on the audience is like, this is obviously, what film people do so well is like, you never even notice. Because that's why I assumed, honestly, because I know how hard it is to shoot actually in the subways in New York, and it's gotten harder over the last 20 years, I just assumed, only because I thought that would be madness to shoot this live. But you guys went into the madness, Hearts of Darkness. I
mean, I think we started to look for a space out of, like, Jon had these huge visions for these numbers, but we also just had this, we had, as every movie does, we had a certain amount to work with, and so to build something like this, and to build, these trains actually just rode down the subway tracks. You couldn't get, all those trains would have had to be built. And when we went to I think one of the biggest inspirations was the day we went and looked at the modern subway car at the Brooklyn Museum, and then we started to see these vintage cars, and it sparked. Right. It sparked this amazing journey that landed us here at your Joker subway station.
And the other amazing spot,
it's in the Heights station now. Wait, hold on. Let me get there in a second, because I have one more question just creatively, because this was awesome. I thought this was such an incredible and creative choice. where did this come from? Not just, well, the execution, just because I'm curious, because it's such a precise shaft, but also just this idea. Like when it finally culminates in this moment, I was just thrilled, and it's really beautiful and emotional. Where did that come from?
This was a really hard moment for us because we couldn't figure out how to get back because it seemed like the song was peaking just a little bit after this, actually, and so but there was nothing more to do in this space. It felt like, sorry, that's my baby, not a cat, my baby. So we went through this transition so many times with all different versions, and when it came down to let's get her back on the train, and I think it was Alice who suggested these light shafts that matched the subway train, and for her to just grab it and just do a match cut. There's no silly business. That's us just matching as best as we can.
Well, not just the compositional match, but the creative idea behind that. Was that just
and to get the exact right diet? I mean, we played with, and I can't remember what we ended up with. I feel like it was a theatrical light. I think it was called a mega point. So this was when we had that stage day. This was one of those things that we really we struggled with, and we tested all different sources until we found the right light that could make the exact same size diameter as the subway pole. Getting into that tunnel was so important to us, and so the number couldn't continue on down here, and it was fun because everyone loved just going and grabbing these subway lights while we were shooting.
When I saw it in the edit room, I was like, what is this thing? It's like, I feel like it's like science fiction all of a sudden. It's like, I didn't have John or Alice didn't share what they're doing. And then I realized that, oh my God, it's the subway pole. And I sometimes you're just jumping out of your seat when you see something for the first time, in dailies, and you're like, oh my God, this is, and then, that and the ending, of course. But, it's so much fun to be reacting to an idea, and you're like, and I had no idea where it came from either. I was just like, that seems so cool.
Yeah.
Well, John, I love when working with John. For me, he gives me intentions per scene, and this scene, he said, was an elegant, elegant journey to America, and elegance was what was so important. And so that idea of elegance throughout the lighting was my intention and my inspiration for everything that we did. So it was always like, okay, are we doing this? Are we lighting this moment in an elegant way? And I don't know what exactly the moment was, but how do we elegantly transition back to the subway?
I remember in the setup at the when you were testing, we were doing the test at the warehouse. That was one of the biggest things that we needed to test, was how do you create a column of light that could then cut to the pole? And also, is this going to look like a stripper pole that she's grabbing onto? Because that's the opposite of what we want.
But we also had one more challenge too, which was this atmosphere. The MTA was like, no, you can't use atmosphere, because there was a platform at the top, and they were sure people were going to think it was a fire. And this was a 30-day constant with locations. Did you get every night I check in with them, did you get permission to use atmosphere here? Because this location doesn't work without the atmosphere, and none of this lighting that we had created would work.
No, it really doesn't. It's interesting. You probably, even if you were never influenced by it, this one shot here, do you remember that shot? I don't know if we have it in here, but in Once Upon a Time in America.
This site is amazing, Larry.
I just want to see if we have that shot. Oh yeah, it's this scene. He's watching her dance, and there was something about when I saw that image. I don't know, maybe it's the top light, the sort of, and again, this is about the time when she probably immigrated to America, or to America from where there was something about that just reminded me of this. And I don't know, I wondered if you sort of had ever seen it.
That definitely wasn't a reference, but I remember when we did that shot, this was sort of towards us getting back to the other platform. It's the very last piece on the left platform. And originally we had it all. We didn't mix color temperatures there at all. And at the very last minute, I mean, I loved our dimmer board up. I'm like, I had him quickly change the 2 lights on the side to warm, and it made this shot. Otherwise, it would have been
absolutely. All right, well, let me go to this tunnel because, okay, the tunnel is obviously cool, right? The tunnel exists. It's full of graffiti. That's whatever. They should have this tunnel. This tunnel's not lit like this. I've never been in this tunnel. Right. This is 100% you guys.
Right. There are like LED awful fluorescent looking pin LED lights that are like these 1x1 squares that light up this tunnel every few.
But do they do a kind of effect like this a little bit or not really?
Not at all.
Okay. So again, this is another extraordinary section of just creativity with lighting and cues and color. When did this idea form shape in terms of creating the actual accent of the tunnels with your lights that are on the floor, I assume, right? That's the only way you can do it. Right?
We've got chroma key Studio Force lights every, I don't know, 6 to 10 feet apart down the full 900 feet of the tunnel. And there is cable along the sides, but that got painted out. And
sure.
And we saw this tunnel. I mean, Lin took Jon to this tunnel years ago, and this was always like had to be in the movie. But and I don't know where at one point Jon decided it was for the end of Vicincy Fay. But when he took us to this tunnel, it was just this. It was magnificent, but it was in the middle of winter and it was cold. But the magic that happened this night was amazing. So it was 118 degrees at 5 p.m. and the tunnel is literally sweating. So we've got all this humidity. I remember Jon leaned against the tunnel at one point. I'm like, I won't lean on that. He's like, what, you guys wet it down? I said, no, we didn't. And
then I regret that I ever touched that wall.
It had like mold growing all over it. But it created it. I mean, we knew we were doing these chasing lights, and that the lights would change. And originally this scene actually is not a Abuela's death scene. And so warm light again represents Cuba, and cold light represents New York. And so when she says, should I stay or should I go? When we shot it, and in the play, it's, should I go to the DR with Usnavi?
Well, actually, in the show, it's a totally different lyric. It's about what will I do with this winning ticket. This is where we find out
you're right. Never mind.
We changed it to be about a choice in her life, and it just so happens that it matched, which is the brilliance that Myron figured out, was that this number put at the moment of her crossing over to the other side was more emotionally connected to our movie. And
so this wasn't where it was, like, this is one of those
like we always knew it was implying, and it was sort of hinting at her next life leaving this planet, but it was never it was earlier in the movie, so it was not at that point yet. And because we didn't think that you could survive 4 songs literally back to back in a row. And when Myron got all the footage, of course, the first thing he suggested was moving this number to the spot where she's on that bed, not being able to breathe very well, and going through this experience with her. And I was like, hell no, that we've already had 3 songs in a row. You cannot do another song. Like, this would be way too much for our audience to take in. But he held to that idea, and it took about 2 months for me to come around to it, of testing this movie with this number in a different spot, and this number not really showing up a lot in our list of favorites. And I didn't understand why, because to me, this was the most powerful.
Right.
And as soon as we moved in, we're like, let's just try it. It hit.
But there was also a moment this number was out of the movie too, for like a brief moment too. I saw a cut, or maybe it was a friends and family screening, and I was like completely devastated. Of course, I kept it to myself, but it just was like, we went through all of this, and we put Olga through all of this, and it's gone. And luckily, Myron is brilliant and knew exactly where it needed to be.
Yeah, so tell me how that came fairly early in your mind, in terms of like, this is, because this is something that I think people, obviously filmmakers who are on the way inside understand this very clearly. but every movie has things that shift wildly in terms of their order, their placement in the movie. It happens all the time. And I think people just assume that's the way it was always going to be. So it's amazing to me that this wasn't always that transition of her death. Like, it's crazy. So tell me, but you sort of, did you already suspect that, like, the movie needed a better transition for when she dies? Or just you loved the scene, you thought it read, like, tell me a little.
Well, you could tell my enthusiasm for when I was seeing the footage in itself. I was very excited about the whole musical number, but when I placed it in the film and saw it, within, it comes in within the first maybe 30 to 45 minutes of the film, I knew it wasn't having the impact that it had as a self-standing musical number or a scene. Like, sometimes a scene could be like really great, or a musical number could be like the coolest thing you've ever seen, but in the body of the film, if it doesn't have it, that if I'm not feeling anything at the end, then I know it's a problem. So I had a suspicion that it could work later. So I had pitched it to Jon within weeks of wrapping. But it's one thing to suggest something, and it's another thing to actually do it. So you don't always, you kind of game things out in your head. Like, you could recut a scene, you could restructure something in your head, but until you actually do it, you don't always know it'll work. And then, I think we did a friends and family screening with the musical number, and people were they were beating it up pretty bad. They were like, this doesn't work, you need to cut it. And this was before we moved it.
Was it earlier? Like, literally, did the audience then know she won? She had the winning ticket way earlier?
No, it was because they had rewritten the lyrics. So it was just about her, whether or not she was going to go to it was actually, see where Yusnavi's showing the pictures to.
Yeah.
It was actually right after, it was around that section.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Like, around the time when we find out Nina's, like, quit and has left Sanford and all those sort of things, right?
Yeah, it was very early. So
right, because around here, because you even have a little historical moment here with her talking about. So it was kind of in this world.
Yeah.
Got it. Oh my God, who knew?
I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, yes, when the fact that it could move, and by the way, you work with what you have, and the opening of this number, as recorded and as shot, is not the opening that you see in the movie. It starts big. You hear this big thing, and she goes, "Calor, calor, calor," and she jumps into this thing. It's very big, and so not only did you have to say, okay, we're gonna move this, then you're like, well, this tone doesn't work. So how do we go from a woman who can't breathe in her bed to this sort of echoes of these memories of these ideas and transition us? And so our Myron worked with our music editors to create out of nothing this sort of slow buildup. So it's almost like her a cappella. They just took her vocals and echoed it out and just had the sound of the street whispering sort of behind her. And then eventually the strings would come in. Eventually the drums would come in. It didn't just hit the way it is in the actual recording. So there was you couldn't just do it. You couldn't just be like, tonight, go put it in. It was like, well, can this song actually turn into a whisper?
Ay, mama.
And that was the key, because we couldn't prove it to everybody, then we wouldn't have ever gone.
And by the way, there was limitation. We didn't have $100 million to shoot this film, so we couldn't go back. But because of that, we were able to creatively figure out, solutions. And when I first tried it and we showed it to my to the editorial department, the entire department turned on us and they're like, it's not going to work, you're wasting your time. And Jon and like closed our door, like, nope, we think it can work. We just got to keep trying to work on these transitions and trying to figure out, maybe we need to shorten the number. At one point we tried it in black and white, like the first 2 minutes in black and white. We tried how can we elegantly transition into this next section without taking the audience out of it. And that just took experimentation.
Alice like gave a look like when you said black and white. Alice, by the way, Alice, for the first 3 weeks of shooting Joker, maybe even 5 weeks, every monitor except for mine was black and white, and Todd was like, "I'm 100% releasing the movie in black and white, 100%." And I was doing all this color work, and I'm like, "Do I keep doing it?" I'm like, "I'm just gonna keep doing it. Maybe he'll change his mind."
Nice.
Wow.
By the way,
yeah, I
this
know what
also
that
was-
was like. Yeah, I would watch cuts in black and white. Like it was literally the movie was gonna be in black and white.
We didn't show Alice the black and white version.
No, I don't think
Well,
we did.
Well, let me ask you about the cues, because then it goes into this like I mean it's really just a tour de force of a scene from
This was
top
crazy,
to
man.
bottom.
We shot this stuff within 10 minutes because that we were being kicked out of this tunnel. And sorry, this is Ruby.
That's all right. We love babies.
We only had one night to shoot this, and we were allowed in at 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. and we had to be out by 4:30 a.m. And from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m., passengers could still use the tunnel. So we were working and trying to do all our lighting cues with passengers walking through. But so then we get to here. John, you want to take over again?
And then we have to figure out the colors of the pattern.
Well, that was the question. I was like, I mean, just because it's so complex. So you figured that day.
Right there.
On the day, because you couldn't know before. We had ideas, but you really couldn't know. And so as soon as we saw what we thought would be the right thing, we were like, oh, that's not the right thing. So we started playing with patterns and the not just the colors, but also what it would be doing. Like we didn't want it to look like a circus. It needed to be elegant, but at the same time, needed to like bring color into the space from the space that was just sort of cool colors, warm colors, to like electrify it. That her life, everything lined up in her life the way it was supposed to be. And it's supposed to be a celebration of that journey, not a sad idea of it. And so anyway, it was just really cool. And we had an image from the very beginning of this movie, from the pitch side of this movie, where it was like, the cool thing about this movie is we're not going to take the audience to people's dreams somewhere else, because that's not the way you dream. When when I growing up as an immigrant's kid, like you dream with what's in front of you and in the space. So we wanted to bring all these dreams into Washington Heights, into the street. So if they're dreaming about a golfing, we're not going to cut to a golf place. We're going to put the putting green on the sidewalk. And so this was a moment to really do what we said we were going to do, which was bring this idea of this dream to the actual tunnel that you cannot do in any other medium. And so when I saw it with the full color and saw what Alice and the lighting team had created, I was just like, epic. It was crazy.
That's such a great point. I mean, that plays in some of the playfulness, even with like the what's it called? The plate that's like a mix.
Yeah, the manhole cover.
Manhole cover. The heads in the salon.
No, maybe.
All of these things, we were like, where is the line? And we didn't know. So we sort of shot everything and knew that Myron was going to have to find the line for us. But the manhole cover was actually really important for us because, by the way, that was not necessarily planned. That was on the day he's walking and we're like, oh, there's a manhole cover. How cool would it be if you just put your foot on it and like did it like a record, and I'll make it spin later. So that's all on the fly. Alice is on the fly, our actors, Anthony's on the fly, I'm on the fly. VFX, I'm like, can you do it? They're like, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
But it's important because the whole movie, we have to make sure that we're not jumping the shark too quickly. So we have to, in a way, set the audience up. Everything's very rhythmic. Everything's naturally coming out of the rhythms of the streets. And yet this sort of says, hey, we're gonna go far eventually. We're not gonna do it right now. You're gonna get a little taste of it.
Yes.
But you're gonna have to be okay with us being more playful as the movie goes, to earn the spot where we can actually turn the whole building on its side. Because if you started with that, then I don't think you buy into any of these versions of expression. You had to sort of introduce the language and then slowly get there.
Yeah. Well, it's tone, right? That's the number one thing you as a director have to establish like within the first 5 minutes, right? It's like, what are the rules? What's the tone? And then within that, you're going to see flourishes of this. And so I thought when I saw this early enough in the movie, I was like, great. So that when the heads turn in the salon, I'm like, it's within the rules. When, all those little things. And again, trust me, for what we don't hit, watch the damn movie, because there's so many other things. Like, this hair salon's really fun and cool, and it's a set that they built, almost feels handheld. This whole club scene, which is all in red and beautiful. I mean, I could go for 20 minutes just talking about how you deal with blackout and the fact that now you've lost all the lights in a city in which mostly you shoot because it has lights. But in our limited time, I just want to talk about the roof, because I should know exactly how you did it, but I actually don't. So I'm embarrassed that I need now you to tell me how you did this whole sequence, which is they walk on the side of the roof, they walk down the building, they are all of these images. Just talk to me in terms of execution.
Right, because what's unique to our movie is that each character expresses their hopes and their dreams, their anxieties and their fear, not through only song and dance, but through the environment around them. And so you go from that manhole cover to this moment. And this moment with Nina and Benny, where their relationship defies gravity. And so the way we did it was, we do have a moving set. So we have a dance floor that has one upright. We have a dance floor that has one upright postage stamp piece with the balcony in it. So if you go to this,
is it like?
If you go to the first shot where there's that one. Great. So right here, where the balcony they're standing on is upright, and around us we're in a green screen environment. And so the background, so we're in a green screen environment, but we shot our background on, I think, July 7th. So a month before we shot this. This is August 9th, and we shot our George Washington Bridge shot on the 7th of July. And we shot that during something called Manhattan Henge. And it's the only time when the sun sets north of the George Washington Bridge. Right. And so I wanted the light to come from a very specific direction here. And so we had visual effects go out, and there were 2 days it sets north. And luckily the first day they went out with the crane, and luckily that first day was a beautiful sunny day and they got this shot. So we had this shot, and we could overlay it with our green screen. So we could get a sense of what we were going for and what the light should feel like. And so we're in a green screen world, and we've got an 18K on a crane with several people pushing it, and an operator in the crane bucket, because as they're dancing, Benny leans over and sort of braces himself on the fire escape, and then the wall starts to drop into flat. And so then our light needs to move at the same time as the wall is moving, so that our shadows don't change. And then the last element is you have a sky source, and the sky source also has to change. And I mean, this is just my part of this. So we've got we've got 3 huge light boxes of S60s that transition, move the sky so that stays on top. And that's in time with time code to the music. So that is sort of the digital version, and then the analog light is people having to actually physically move the light.
And then talk to me about how the camera.
And so then John
and that element, yeah, exactly.
John, Chris Scott, and the visual effects supervisor Mark, we did VR, we did motion capture early in prep, right, John? Where we got to play and start to explore, how is this going to work? Because we didn't know, should the George Washington Bridge always stay vertical? Should it be or should it go horizontal? And how do we sell that landing? And originally we thought, we just attach the camera to the wall and it will move at the same time. And then in this motion capture environment, we realized that doesn't sell anything. It's boring. And the opening shot and the last shot need to be as long as possible, where they return to normal and where they leave, where gravity shifts. And so that was sort of the exciting part, was how do we design these shots? And when you asked earlier, like what was something that wasn't working, and it was the last shot. We had this idea of what it should be, but then you suddenly have the real actors there, and this wall that doesn't, it's hydraulic, so it's never exactly precise.
Right.
And it was like trying, and then suddenly it clicked how we would move the camera in this really sweeping way. But then we needed rehearsal time, and we were crunched for time for sure. It was like the last day of our shoot, and John came over to me. He's like, "Show me what you've got." And I'm like, "Don't worry, John, I've got this. I need 20 more minutes." And he left, and he came back, and it was just like magic. We all watched it. We were all tearing up. It was just, everything worked, but it really was like, how do we tell this moment? How do we tell this story where these two people aren't going to stay together, and not just sort of fall into the challenge of like, this is a cool effect, but really telling Nina and Benny's story. And so, and sometimes the shots you pick in prep and design in prep don't tell the story well.
But yeah, and then Myron was very specific about coming into the shift of the gravity and coming out, that we needed the audience to see that we weren't cheating any of that, that the actual actors who actually aren't dancers at all, and were very exposed here. We had no doubles, no any of that stuff, no vocal doubles, no physical doubles for any of our actors. It's pretty amazing they can do all of this stuff. And they were the most vulnerable. I had nothing else to cut to cover for them. And that was a lot of pressure for them.
But let me ask Alice one more specific question about just the move itself, meaning, so you're on a crane, I assume, a techno crane?
We're on a 50-foot techno.
Right, with like an Oculus or something like that?
Yeah, and I can't remember what head we had, but yeah.
The Matrix or something, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that we could move in all directions, because, and so it really is like this brain warp, because gravity has to shift to normal. And so it took a lot of rehearsal, and that's why, like, the first shot, we actually didn't sweep up that way, and we were sort of closer, and suddenly when we started to pull away at first and then push in, it all worked.
Right. And I guess in one way you have to almost free yourself and go, they're going to do their thing, let me just figure out what looks right through the lens to like capture this moment. Otherwise, if you're trying to like stay in sync too much, it like you say, if you attach yourself to it actually defeats like the sort of
the magic.
The magic of it. Right, exactly. It works against it.
And just as a logistical thing, this wall is probably the most expensive thing in our whole movie, and was not built until about a week before we're shooting. So as much as our actors and our dancers and choreographers had to rehearse, they had nothing to rehearse on that would actually emulate what's happening. So everything was just in a studio, just to like try to like mark it in. But when they had about 3 days before we started shooting to get on the machine. And of course the machine had quirks that they had to work out, but that's when the actual choreography had to get in there, and they had to figure out all this stuff. That's the actual time that Alice could actually watch this stuff and be like, oh, this is how I'm going to shoot it. The only way we had outside of that was we captured some of the dance in a virtual environment, just to know like where could cameras be that would have the most effective thing. But
like you say,
until they got
until the two actors have to actually navigate this thing that's moving and gravity shifting and all that. It's like a whole different game.
And our AD actually was Joe Reedy. He was amazing. I mean, this whole number was a team effort, and every single person, it took every single person's brains power to make this work. Movie making is a team effort, and when it works, it's magnificent. And this moment was magnificent for every single person. Everyone had just, and it's the last thing we did. Everyone just had this complete joy at the end of this. And Joe helped us so much figure this out, because he gave us 4 days, but not 4 full days. We had 4 mornings to shoot the scene, and then in the afternoons we'd move into our bodega. So we'd learn something every day.
It's such a smart thing to do as far as scheduling.
Yeah, and so by the time we shot this last shot, like we had been, you know, we understood how the wall worked, and the actors felt totally comfortable, even though they had to slide down this brick wall.
That's such a great note, such a great thing to take away from in terms of how you schedule a movie and those little things that can make such a difference, you know?
Yeah.
Listen, like I said, because I watched this movie so many times, I could go through every single thing. I have questions about it. I'm not going to do that today. We'll do Wicked. We'll do a shot talk for Wicked. We'll get more into some other things. Anyway, this was a complete joy. I really appreciate you guys spending some time with me today. The movie's fantastic. Everyone, if they haven't seen it, it's, you know, you can watch it on HBO Max. You can still see it. I'll see you guys at Camera Maj, which will be super fun. And just again, thank you, and thanks for making a good movie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks for everything you're doing.
Absolutely.